Look, we know what happened. It was sometime after Lou Recker died, and Peter Shell was secretly taping me. But Saul Brecker goaded me into snorkeling. Yeah, sure, Pete, because Pete was going, "You've been porking anybody lately," which is a Brecker word. And I said, "Yeah, sure, tied up and porked her with a carrot." And Jaime Carbonell and Andrea Swimmer slapped five with Yoko Ono and Amanda Harcourt. And I was about 25 years old, so it was 30 years ago sometime. Peter Shaw was funding the Sandinistas while working with Jaime Carbonell and Brian Eno for Granger Morgan and Donald Trump. And these are just the facts of Noam Chomsky's syndicate and academics. Now, the winemakers who were in neurobehavioral research and Attica State Prison psychiatrists who mastermind the program of using poisons for the Israelis on Pittsburgh's public school students had a poster called Disneyland After Dark, which had Fido or Pluto urinating on Mickey's face, and Snow White with 16 legs under her skirt. You get the idea. So they played Ken Crimson for me. And of course, Penny Crary dragged me to hair. So it was the usual Epstein stuff from Carnegie Mellon University. I was just a child when Don Ostro, Terry Visco, and Mark Mancini carried on about what their antics at Climax One, and I picked up that story about probing a girl with a vegetable and then making her dinner with it. That's what they did, and it wasn't Bond. It was a shenanigan. They were laughing and slapping five. Next time I saw them, Genesis selling by the pound. Mancini took Visco to along with my tickets because I was forbidden to go. I was just a kid. But they implanted this stuff with the help of soundtrack experts like Yoko Ono and David Bronstein. Not David Bronstein, but his family, Curtis Hunter and them. And they had a friend with a VW who showed me how to hotwire VWs for the Callows. And it conked by the White House on Fifth Avenue. So the stolen Beetle leads to the White House, the Love Bug. And of course, this was all programmed guerrilla theater to describe in phenomenology the AIDS attack. It took me to Mount Desert Island. I opened the black lead letter in front of witnesses, Megan Dietz, some creepy dude named Dwight, who was building momentum for the Zeos to go after Gaza, who actually seems to credit himself with claiming that I had fathered abortions. You know, this was what the Zeos were arranging to, they were just killing my children. That CMU, Dwight and his allies, plastered the skull with a picture of my beautiful son. I didn't want the abortion. They were saying, "What girl would have your child?" Yeah, yeah. What girl would have your child? Yeah, yeah. And this is what Seattle called psychiatry. This is what the Veterans Administration called Catholicism. This is what, the Timothy McVeigh crowd down in Texas call nonviolence. And you can't bother to try to make any sense of any of it. They want to cut off your dick and stick it in your mouth because you stood up for the safety of school children in places like Pittsburgh and Gaza. And they just Matterhorn from two tongues because they're failures. They went into Vietnam and dropped napalm on rice fields, and they want to be the boss because they did that. And it's a duplicity that's ingrained, and they have networks in Pittsburgh, like Epstein networks. Children are forced to accept brutal sexual conquest as children. My sister was just a kid when this guy broke her ribs. And they have these insane, brutal car thieves who forced me to use inhalants. They kidnapped and tortured me. They go by names like Mancine for Manson Cinema and Pitman for Pitman, Hitman, Quarryman, Pit of Hell, Pitbull, and it's done by Attica State Prison Psychiatry. And they think they're on the moral high ground. Before Gods had happened, when Hakeem Jeffries was saying, crush the anti-Semites, crush the anti-Semites. Every chance he got, somebody slammed the door to the bathroom at the bus station and locked me in it. It was like being suffocated, trapped alive under rubble. And of course, the Gaza. It was obviously a military guerrilla theater operation. They poisoned me in the mouth and they have this setup here in Tacoma. They have a bunch of setups in Tacoma, but one of them really galls me is the Berlin Beer Hall, the Beer Hall Berliner. Because, that's where Weasler got his start, at the Berlin Beer Hall push. And it overlooks the Tacoma Dome, which is like Hiroshima Dome, and the Disappearing Mountain, which is like the Magic Mountain that Truman legendarily considered dropping the atomics in demonstration on. And the queers would rather help the people who started AIDS because they have this stupid tape at Seattle Art Museum, the Jaime Carbonell made with Andrea Swimmer, which they think compromises the queer bait. Ha ha, ha 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 ha. They would rather threaten a nuclear weapon than their own children to help the people who they claim killed John Lennon. And to them, it makes perfect sense. Nothing you can say will do anything but go in one ear and out the other. Boom! Because they're endorsed by Paul McCartney and the Crowhead Guster Corelli. And that's the truth of the situation. They have and the Russians were laughing hard at the Ronald Reagan and Bork psychiatry barbershop when Queerball coughed up in Pete Shell's Brecker Studios. They were talking about the Breck girl, and they all go real quick, like because they're all allies of Brecker, who was in on it with Gail Burston. Lube Brecker, get it? Lube Brecker, Michelle Lubin. It's all these puns on oil and sex. Dee Dee was the swastika girl. Dee Dee is correlated to the Library of Congress classification for Nazi Germany. And they killed Martin Luther King. And one of the black people who endorsed them called him Martin Loser King. Adam Clayton Powell got into him for his resistance for the Vietnam War. You get a dude from named Duval, which is like Duval County, where Mar-a-Lago is from, a black guy who says, I know Bush started AIDS and I support him for it. Well, the Seattle queers know he started AIDS and they support him for it too. I mean, who doesn't support him for it? It's like hip hip hooray for Tojo. Tojo's going to get revenge. And you get these people like VJ, whoever his name is, the dude who's an expert, the friends of Noam Chomsky and Midori. and making these tapes with Peter Shaw and going, we got the symbol of American liberalism by the testes. What else did you do when we were to? What else? Tell us what else we did to you when we dragged you through glass clear ball.